Well, welcome and thanks once again for joining me here at Pastor's Positive Mental Health. As you see, yet another wonderful guest that we have, and we'll get to him in just a moment, and I'll let him tell you all about his wonderful self. But if you like this, please subscribe and share and all that good stuff. Like it, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. That it'll be in the comment section that you can contact me. Check out the website at ppmhi.org. And without any further shenanigans from me, let's move on. So here we have Ryan Strehlow, DCE, so Director of Christian Education. At a pretty large church in Southeast Idaho. In fact, someone would call it the mega church of Pocatello, Idaho, and it's quite the facility. A school with a high school and a preschool and a large church. So just a lot of great things happening there. And so, really, Ryan, I just want you to kind of share, if you would, your journey to where you're at now. But one of the things I'm always looking for is in your role, even though you don't have the official title of an ordained pastor. What you do have is a lot of pastoral work in what you do. A lot of things that you do are very pastoral, which is what we want in those positions because you're working with people, and I don't want to give away all that you do because I want you to be able to share with that. But before we get to what you actually do in the church, could you just tell us a little bit about what brought you to be involved in the ministry?
Yeah, so I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is kind of a LCMS Lutheran hotbed. I call it one of the three Lutheran meccas, actually. Milwaukee, St. Louis, and Fort Wayne. But I ended up kind of going through school. I actually went to a Lutheran school my whole life, actually, preschool all the way through undergrad. And when I was in high school, kind of the path for me was kind of going on to be a secondary ed high school teacher was kind of my idea. Both my mom and my dad were and are Lutheran school teachers. And so my sister knew she was going to be a Lutheran school teacher since like fourth grade or something like that. So I was just like, naturally, this is what I'm going to do. And then I went to this big conference that we do once every 3 years called National Youth Gathering, where it's like 25,000 LCMS Lutheran youth. And I kind of just had this feeling that like God wasn't really calling me into being a teacher. And there was other things kind of going on at that moment in life, and I just like was kind of having this like personal crisis, and I ended up yelling at God one night in a hotel room, "What do you want me to do?" And he didn't answer me. But then I went into my youth director's room and I just said, "Hey, this is what I'm struggling with. Like, I don't know what to do." And they're like, "Have you ever heard of this thing called DCE?" And I'm like, "No, what's that?" And their answer was, "Well, you get to do this every day." And I'm like, "Sweet, I get to go to this amazing conference where I hear all these speakers and, worship with 25,000 other people. That's the best thing in the world." So kind of on a whim, I actually went to Concordia, because although Milwaukee is a hotbed of Lutheran churches, DCE ministry wasn't huge, actually. It was a lot of part-time youth directors, a lot of volunteer. Like my school was my church and school worshiped like 600-700 on a Sunday, 300 kids in the school, and they had a volunteer youth director.
Wow.
And so youth ministry was not a focus of what they were doing there. It was all school ministry. And so that was kind of part of the thing that ended up pushing me towards wanting to go towards DC. Obviously, I researched it more. I didn't just jump on a plane and go to, Concordia for that. But as I looked at it, I'm like, man, how in the world has our church not invested in this? And how much more of my friends could still be like going to church and in the word had my church had a DCE rather than just a volunteer. Like, and my youth directors were great, don't get me wrong, but
Right.
there's a different level of care that you can give. So, long story short, went to school there. I ended up going on my internship up in Alaska for a year, and they ended up calling me to that congregation. And I stayed there for another couple years, and then um, met a guy who is now my senior pastor here down in Pocatello and well up there. And he ended up calling me, and I've been here for about 9 years now. So.
So, what's your current role then in the church? What are the ministries that you oversee and what do you do there?
Yeah, so my primary call to this congregation is middle school and high school youth ministry. But that in it, you kind of outlined it a little bit, but I think preschool through 12th grade, we have 550 kids on our campus every day. And so obviously I'm doing, middle school youth group, high school youth group, confirmation in our denomination is very, very big. And so, do that. Um, but then there's also a lot of other ancillary things. I coach in the high school. I'm kind of a pseudo guidance counselor for the high school, which now I'm actually pursuing a master's degree in school counseling because of that, to kind of try to get some more tools to help out with that. Um, and just a myriad of other things, First Communion, family Bible hour on Sunday mornings, um, you know, the
Uh,
list goes on.
and you teach a couple classes, right? In
That's right. That's right.
school.
Yep. So I teach our eighth grade Christian studies class, which is a theology class. So yeah.
Yeah. Which is great. You're, educated enough to do that, which is wonderful. And so so you told us a little bit about the school. What's a little bit about the church dynamic? So you have over 500 students in the school. Not all of them worship at the church there. There's a pretty good mix, which again is a wonderful. For those who don't know, a lot of the reasons that Lutherans start schools is really their main outreach. Is how we share the gospel with a world that is in great need. So we've put great schools together. They have great academics, and it's very attractive to a lot of people. And so we get them to come to school, and they have to participate in everything that the school does. And there's chapel every week, which you're involved with at times. There's these things where these events that the church and the school hopefully kind of partner together to do so that we can reach people for the kingdom and share Jesus with them. So that's the school side a little bit we talked about. So what is the main thing you do on the church side, and what does it look like on a regular basis at the church?
Yeah, so Sunday mornings here we have two services, and between those two services, I'd say we worship about 400 on a Sunday. We're kind of actually starting to get some, well, I shouldn't say get some people back. We're adding new people um, after COVID finally, and kind of getting back to our pre-COVID numbers, I feel like. And and so we do that. In between those two services, we have a Bible hour. At this year, we have a very small confirmation class, so we teach every other week rather than every week. But normally, that would kind of be an area of responsibility for me every week as well. Um, and then and so kind of just overseeing kind of those main groups on Sunday morning as well. So like you said, it's a unique population here. So we only I would say we have about 20 to 25% of our student population that actually comes to church here. Um, and of the people that do come to church here, we're probably only about 10% LCMS truly Lutheran. Like obviously like the people who worship here are now Lutheran, we would say, I suppose. But that's not really the focus of what we're doing. What we always say and what our pastor says is, we're in the business of making Christians, and it just so happens that they're learning Lutheran theology along the way. We're in a unique setting where, you know, 40 to 60% of our surrounding population here in Pocatello is LDS Mormon. And so that is kind of the area that we're in. And so, the majority of people who have lived in Pocatello their whole life either were members of the church at one point or just have kind of this cultural community tie to that faith tradition and are kind of coming from that from many different perspectives.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's unique.
That's kind of our unique piece here.
Yeah. So, so let's talk a minute about, I mean, you do retreats every year and obviously, some of it is you're not doing these by yourself,
Mhm.
because you have a decent amount of students and kids that go on these retreats and you have, you lead weekly middle school and high school, regular meetings, right, throughout the week. And again, you can't do it all on your own. So, kind of tell me how you rely on church members for some of these things.
Yeah, so our middle school youth group, we meet on every other Monday, actually. That was a switch we made this year, for, to be honest with you, for the mental health of myself, but really our volunteers, actually, because, um, you know, showing the love of Jesus to middle schoolers can be really difficult sometimes. And so, and what we actually found is meeting weekly for that group, you'd have more issues kind of pop up with each other that would spill over from school. That ministry is very emblematic of our school. Like we get anywhere from 25 to 40 kids on a Monday night, and it's because I send out an email to our middle school, like everybody in our middle school, the 90 kids in our middle school or whatever. And so I've got a team of about 5 other volunteers that come out for that night in addition to me. And then even this last weekend, they had a retreat up at our camp, about 4 hours north of us, a winter retreat. And I'm kind of going through some health stuff right now, and I wasn't able to go. And so that team went, but then I was also able to reach out to 2 or 3 other adults that were able to go up on that retreat as well. So I have kind of my committed like 5 or 6 that are there, for every regular youth meeting and retreat. But then I also have another probably 10 or so that I can call up and be like, hey, can you come do this thing with us? And so on the high school side, very, very similar. So another committed team of like 4 to 5 adults, but an additional, 10 or so people that I can reach out to for help in those kind of situations as well. So
Yes, I'd like to explore that for just a moment because, here's this retreat, kind of a cool thing, great place that we get to go to, in the Sawtooth Mountains, and this is your thing. I mean, you're the one that puts it together, you plan it all, and yet you were unable to go. And so, tell me how you felt when you were able to call some people and they responded and said, "Yeah, we'll go do it." How did that make you feel?
yeah, I mean, it's amazing that people can step up in those moments. And, we're reading in staff actually. Sorry.
That's fine.
This book right now is Strengthening the Soul of Your Leadership.
Mhm.
And we're very early in the book right now. And there was this one quote that stood out to me from the start of this chapter. She writes, I heard myself saying, I'm tired of helping other people enjoy God. I just want to enjoy God for myself.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think as like people in ministry, like we often get into those mental spaces where we're just tired of caring for other people, and it's like looking around like, man, can someone care for me?
Mhm.
And to kind of look up from that moment and be like, these people were immediately willing to just jump in a bus and be with kids because I couldn't, like that's a pretty huge moment to realize that, like, yeah, like these people are ministering to me as much as I get to minister to them. So
Well,
yeah.
I'd like to explore that a little bit. So, you are, you're not feeling great for various reasons, and you send these people. Awesome that they jumped in, and I know that makes you feel relieved. But for the people who are listening to this, I wonder, how did you feel that whole weekend? Obviously, I'm not talking about physically that you weren't there and you were supposed to be there. How were you feeling during that time?
So I will correct you slightly. This retreat is not one that I actually like put on. It's kind of one of those rare retreats where you just pay the money, you show up, and then the camp staff up there runs it. And so
Okay.
um, it for that reason, it's one of my favorite retreats to go on because you kind of get there and build relationships with kids and not have to worry about what's the next thing that happens at this time and all this other stuff. You just get to be present with kids, which I love that retreat for that reason. But to be honest with you, like Friday, I was kind of a little bit nervous. Sunday, a little bit nervous because those are the things that I would have been in charge of. Like, okay, we're driving up, we're stopping here, we're doing this, we got to be on time, all this other stuff. But Saturday, I almost forgot that there was a retreat happening.
Awesome.
And that was, but like in reflection on that Saturday night, when I started getting texts from some of my leaders up there, like it was great to just be like, no, like they've got this under control, you know? And so that was just a very like settling feeling in a good way, you know?
Who
So,
gave them the Wi-Fi password so they could text you? That's what I want to know.
oh, I always get the Wi-Fi password up
You
there.
do, but no.
Yeah.
That's some of that actually one of the enjoyments of going away to things like that is your level of disconnect to some
Only
degree.
only if your wife is there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, fair enough. And so, I'm always going, to the staff when I go to things like that. Hey, what's the Wi-Fi password? Because
Yeah,
it's so
absolutely.
important. I can't be disconnected, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
anyway,
yeah. That's my
uh,
first mission when I get there too. So,
fortunately, they don't change it too often. So,
right, right.
tell me about a time when maybe you were just kind of ministry was rough, or you're just were feeling a little down, and how you felt built up in the ministry.
Hmm. It's hard to not say right now.
That's fine.
Um, like, so I've been going through what I assume to be some gallbladder issues, for about, what is it? About 2 months right now. And, in the middle of trying to get my master's degree and kind of all these other things. And, um, it's just been a really overwhelming kind of moment in my life. And, um, it's been tough, but I think that having, a senior pastor that you can rely on, having other pastors in town that you can rely on, having, other coworkers, even like people from school, from undergrad who I'm still very connected with, to have those people to kind of uplift and different things like that has just been huge. Um, to know, you kind of you go through like smaller moments in life and people say, "Oh, I'm praying for you,"
Right.
and you're like, "Yeah, okay, whatever. Thanks."
Right.
At least that's me. I guess that's not all people.
Yeah.
My relationship with prayer is bad, and I need to fix that. But like in moments when you're kind of really going through it, and somebody who, like, even just a regular parishioner who you almost never talk to comes up to you and said, like, you've been in my prayers,
Hmm.
like that changes kind of how you look at that moment, and you're like, I really appreciate that, because there's moments I think where we're all just like, you say that and it's like, okay, this is a moment in life that I can get through, and it's good. Whereas like this moment I think is one where it's like, no, I really need those prayers right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think having people give you that kind of follow through it just changes your the way that you're looking at that moment in life, I think.
Yeah, and I think that you have these moments where you do feel we'll use the word weak for lack of a better term, but you feel weak, and to know that somebody is truly caring for you, that they would think of you, even if you don't, like you said, someone that you don't have a lot of interaction with as a parishioner, and they say, "Hey, you've been on my heart, and I've been praying for you." That's a real meaningful thing that the Lord uses as one of my main things for the ministry that I do with Pastors Positive Mental Health is how God put us together, Ephesians chapter 4, that we would work together to build one another up in love. And so here's this moment where you feel genuinely cared for. Where, in the past, someone says, "Hey, I'm praying for you." Like, okay, great, thanks. But now you're in a moment where you're like, I really recognize my need for those prayers. And God provides that through, to what you said, someone I probably wouldn't expect to come and say that to me. But yet that's just a beautiful way that God works in the church. And so, it's something that we could all be praying for, that you get this issue resolved too. So that's no
Yeah.
fun. You
Yeah.
don't want to be like Paul that says, "I prayed 3 times, take it away." Well, maybe we do want to be that way. Anyway, so
Right. Right.
over the years, what do you think? What have you found maybe to be the most challenging aspect of ministry?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is the people. I
Okay. Yeah.
mean, we talk about this all the time. What's the problem with humanity? Well, we're broken sinners, broken fallen sinners, and so the great part about ministry though too is like that's also the best part of ministry, and so it's it's finding those moments to realize like and we talk about it a lot around here, which is the person who is kind of confronting you in those difficult moments. There's probably something else going on in their life in that moment. And so, finding those ways to figure out what that deeper root is to help them kind of come out of that, I think is really, really important. The other most natural answer is just kind of like work, family life balance and how do you continue to stay connected to your family? Because there's great benefits of being in ministry where you can leave in the middle of the day for 2 hours. But also, you're kind of always on call, and so, um, your wife hasn't had, you know, 2 hours to herself 5 days in a row, and that usually doesn't work out very well,
Right.
and just kind of finding those ways to, help have that support for your family, is really, really important.
Yeah. So how have church members maybe helped you meet some of those challenges, especially with the work-life balance? I mean, have they? I mean, I guess that's some of the question, but
To be honest, my answer would be that I think churches are not very good at it. And this is kind of a difference, I think, between kind of second chair leaders and pastoral leaders, um, is they very much see pastors kind of in that role of need. And as youth directors, it's kind of like, oh, you guys just get to go hang out with kids and like eat chips and run around and throw dodgeballs at each other. What a great job you have, and your life's a vacation every day. And so I think a lot of times, you know, I think parishioners give that benefit of the doubt. It's really interesting. I mean, sorry, I guess I'm mildly complaining here, but
no, that's all right. That's what this for.
uh, but if you actually look at least in our denomination, I'm sure it's different all over the place, but there
Mhm.
is there is a month for pastor appreciation, and there is a day for youth directors, right? And I think that's fairly emblematic of like, and very rarely does that day get celebrated in the church for youth directors. Um, and so, like there's often, I think a lot of that congregational desire gets passed off to pastoral leaders, and not as much to kind of to second chair leaders, I would say.
Yeah, I wonder if Pastor Appreciation Month is why a lot of denominations and faith traditions just call everybody a pastor so that they all
Yeah.
get some recognition. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's on that note though. So I've been in pastoral ministry, getting pushing 30 years now. And this last October was the first time in all my ministry that I actually got recognized on Pastor Appreciation Sunday.
Yeah.
And so it was quite shocking to me because, if people listen to Caleb, they should know it's Pastor Appreciation Month, so you know that people aren't listening to it because they're
Right,
listening to the country station or the classic rock station, or
right,
in our
right.
area, right wing news talk. Anyway, so but so yeah, I mean, I think that you bring up some good things, and I want to comment before we wrap this up. You know, one of the things that we find, and I really appreciate what you shared early on about, yeah, you were raised in the church, and a lot of the people that I talk to that are in pastoral ministry and in full-time ministry, that's a lot of their story. And so I'm hoping that people, parents with children, will hear this if they're listening to it, and even if they're not, but if they're part of a congregation, really encourage people to bring their kids consistently to church because we want them to hear from God. And so you kind of, like you said, I yelled at God. He didn't answer me. Well, he did answer you, just didn't answer you in that moment, didn't yell at you back, and all that good stuff. And so I think that one thing that we see, so I come from a long line of people involved in church ministry. Myself, my brother's a pastor. My dad was involved. My grandfather was involved. My great grandparents were all, in ministry. And so I think that we can learn from that and say, this is an important thing. Back the last you, and then I think almost everyone so far that is in pastoral ministry that I've talked to have a very similar thing. Well, I grew up in the church, and that helped them be better at what they do. I mean, I have one guy that I interviewed that was, jailhouse conversion, type thing, radical change in that. But he kind of envies those who had a story like yours and mine. You know?
That isn't that amazing too? Because oftentimes, like those of us who have grown up in the church the whole life, like you're like, oh, my faith journey has been so boring.
Mm,
Why can I have had all these other terrible addictions or all these other things? And everybody who you talk to that comes from that background is like, what I wouldn't have given to have the story that you had, and to speak to what you're saying, like I kind of have this growing theory. So I've been in ministry in youth ministry for over 10 years now, and kind of have this growing theory, and it's based off of what my mom did, which is force your children to go to youth group. Like, and in the world we live in now, that's not super, um, I don't know, a friendly thing to say out loud, I guess, but and what I mean is kids are so drawn by who is there rather than what is the message that they're receiving. And I often just tell parents, like, you need to make sure that your kid is regularly connected to the word, connected to other adults who love them, who are passionate about the word. Um, and when I say like force them to be there, I'm not saying like have them go twice and see if they like it. I'm saying make them go 3 times a month, 2 to 3 times a month for 6 months. And then if the end of that, they're like, this isn't for me, then the answer is, well, let's find something else that is. Because youth group isn't for every single kid. But what you see is oftentimes parents just asking, well, do you want to?
mm,
And the question, do you want to? Like parents ought to be the primary faith givers to their kids in their families. And it should never be a do you want to? And then that do you want to turns into do you want to go to church today? And the answer is always going to be no to a 14-year-old kid.
I don't
You
want
know,
to hear that. No.
right. Like I get to sleep in and play video games or watch football or whatever. Like, yeah, the answer is always going to be no. But that's our role as parents, is to say, no, this is a high benefit in your life, and we need this to happen. So I think that's one of the best things that parents can. It's what my mom did. She forced me to go to youth group. And eventually I realized, like, wow, this is pretty awesome. And it
Yeah.
stopped being a force and it started being a desire.
Mm.
Uh, it's that fake it till you make it kind of mentality. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is an interesting thing from a pastoral perspective. And I would say for sure my generation and then your generation, because I think I'm old enough to be your dad. Anyway, the math works. But I think that one of the things that I grew up with was we just went to church. I never thought it was an option, right? And again, my parents enjoyed the church family. My family went there. But I think what was missing in a lot of families today is there's a incongruity between the church person and the home person. And so for me, and I think you sounds like growing up too, church was just part of who you were, and it added to the faith that was already expressed at home.
Mhm.
And I think that that would be my exhortation to a lot of parents is that be a Christian at home and at church, because really I find that your job and my job is really adding to and supplementing what parents should already be doing for their children. And so we're supporting them in their endeavor to raise godly children. And so it's always interesting to me. I had one pastor who said, yeah, I had a drug problem. I was drugged to church on Sunday morning, on Sunday night, and on Wednesdays, and so I think that what you're saying and speaking to is, we live in a world where I gotta be careful with how I say this, but you got to outwill your children as a parent, and they got to outlast them. And the reality is I just want to encourage anyone who's a parent, or if you have people in your congregation and you're listening to this and that you don't see regularly who have kids, say, how can I help you? How can I help you and support you? Because it's so important for kids to be in worship and to be involved in the things of the church. Because the reality is they're not all going to be soccer stars. Yeah, you're
I,
right.
I I just was meeting with two parents yesterday who are kind of going through this a little bit, and I think a lot of our parental to what you're saying, like a lot of our parents right now are conceding to their kids way too much,
Yeah.
because there's this overarching belief, that our kids are constantly hearing, is that like you should be able to make whatever decision you want to make. And I'm sorry, like you're 16 years old, you're a child. You might be a really, really big child, but you're still a child. And for most like teenagers, and this is 100% true of me, and I recognize this. I thank God that I recognize this. Like I was not an adult until I was like 24 years old. And we have this overarching idea that the moment you turn 18, the moment that you graduate from high school, you're now an adult and you get to do whatever you want. And it's just like, no, that's not actually how that works. Like you're an adult by your tax paying ID, but
Mhm.
that's about it. Like, I always tell kids the moment you become an adult is the moment your mommy and daddy stop paying for things for you.
Yeah.
And for me, that was 24 years old. I finally started paying for my phone bill.
Mhm.
And until that moment comes in your life, you are not an adult. And that's a good thing, by the way, too. Like
Right.
we've got to start convincing kids it is great to be a kid. Like live in that as not maybe not as long as you can, I shouldn't say that, but like enjoy that time that you have rather than being so angry about the things that you don't get to do. There's a reason that rules are put into place. And oh, by the way, kids thrive when they have more rules. And so oftentimes as parents, our reaction is to retreat and concede. And instead, I think that what the reaction needs to be is to advance and love your kids, but tell them like, no, this is how it's going to be. Like you're a child still, and that's a great, great thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's good. I mean, I think, of course, we're old people, right? I think that, when you're 16, you're just an old person. But then you get out into the real world. My wife and I married at 19, had a kid shortly after that, and you realize I miss being a kid.
It's,
When
it's hard being in the real world.
when I knew there was food and I wasn't worried about paying rent or taxes or insurance. I wasn't worried about any of that. And so, it's one of those things where, if we can relay that. And then also, I think that, loving our kids enough to say, I love you enough to raise you in a faith that right now you find very challenging, but it's the one thing. God is the one thing you can rely on as a constant through every trial of life and every season of life, and that's what's important. Not again, I mentioned soccer flippantly, but in a 35-year-old who's going through a job transition or a loss of job or whatever, their ability to play on the soccer field when they were 16 is not going to carry them through that moment. And so anyway, that's our soapbox for today. Everyone needs to listen to that. So so tell me, Ryan, how someone in your church has made you smile within the last 2 weeks.
Hmm. That's so specific. Um, I don't know. It's hard for me to break free of this moment of life I'm in right now. I think it really does get back to what we talked about earlier, which is like the random two, three, four parishioners that have come up to me and said, I'm praying for you right now, and I've probably spoken 10 sentences to them in the 9 years that I've been here or something like that. Um, and it's just that fellowship of believers that just like really has that impact upon you to be able to, you know, just kind of get through those moments and just be super thankful. There's always in ministry, there's always things that are easy to complain about, but the joys always outweigh those things, and I think that's one of those moments for sure. So
Yeah, and you mentioned something that I just want to just help people with. You're not the first person that I've asked this question to, whether it's on a podcast like this or if it's just on the phone conversations or in person. Tell me how someone's made you smile in the last 2 weeks, someone in your church. It's one of those things that people don't understand. That in ministry, sometimes we know that we're smiling, we know that we're laughing with people, but because of the other season in our life or the other challenges that are going on, those kind of can overshadow, and we need to be better at capitalizing on those moments where you go, wait, that person I just had a great interaction with, and if I could just live in that moment for in this time, I'd be way more built up. One of the things is that, again, you mentioned it earlier, we're never really off the clock.
mhm.
And so when we can recognize those moments where I just, it could be just about a joke about, who's going to the Super Bowl or something, that I can laugh with that person. I don't even know who to root for this year. Anyway, that's a different thing. But
Not Taylor Swift. Oh no, I said that out loud. Shoot.
I thought for a minute my Raiders might get your Todd, your quarterback from Chicago, but I don't think that's going to happen now.
We'll see. I don't know.
Uh,
12's a long way to move back. Sorry.
yeah, okay. Well, we could now, and now we're moving to a different podcast. Anyway, so two guys with losing teams. Okay, so how to be a resilient fan with a team that never wins. Okay, anyway, let's wrap it up with this question. So maybe we'll be more specific. No, you do a lot with parents, and so I think that this is a good question for you. But what's your desire for the people at your church?
I think really, I mean, it's kind of a cliche answer, but it really is true, man. Like you just really want people to come into a life-changing relationship with Jesus. Like I one of the greatest joys that I have here is teaching that eighth grade Christian studies class. And we're in the second semester, and the whole unit that I teach is called Tough Questions for Christians. And we spend about 3 weeks at the start of the semester just talking about what truth is
Hmm.
and why you can trust the Bible to be your absolute truth, and why the Bible is absolute truth, or how it is, and how we can prove with we call it Lysol faith, 99.98% sure that this is the word of God, right? And if that's the case, you kind of got to listen to the things that are in it, and it definitely should change your life. And there's a lot of lukewarm people out there, and we all are lukewarm each and every day in our own unique ways, right? Like sin is a real thing in our life. Um, but as someone in ministry, it's really, really hard to see people who don't fully get it,
Hmm.
you know? And I think I mean, we worship 400, we've probably got 2,000 on our rolls,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And it's really, really hard to not have 1,200 people here every Sunday.
Yeah.
You know, and you can extrapolate. I don't say those numbers to sound like, oh, you know, the
Yeah.
same thing is true in my Alaska congregation. We worshiped 125, but we had 300 on our rolls.
Mhm. Mhm.
Man, like why are the doors not busting open? Why are we not setting up extra chairs every weekend? You know, because like this is a life-changing message. And for the majority of people who are connected to our ministry, it's not actually. And that's scary.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean it's an eternal life-changing message too, and I think that that's we carry that burden. Like this is not just for this life; this is for eternity. And I have a church member here that says, if everyone screwed up and showed up on the same Sunday, we wouldn't have room for everyone. Which is what you're saying. And you sit there and you go, okay, I want you to understand how precious this faith is and how wonderful it is, and how valuable it is, and that's what you want. You want people to truly engage with our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ in a meaningful way that impacts not just what they do on Sunday morning, but their whole lives and the people around them too. And so I appreciate that heart that you have for people. So keep on keeping on, and I guess someone said that somewhere, but anyway. Ryan, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the work that you do. I hope as people listen to this, you will be praying for him, not just for his health, but his work-life balance. But also, you mentioned you are teaching eighth grade Christian studies, and the reality is a lot of the students at eighth grade at that private school, Christian school, don't go on to the high school. A lot of them go to high school for various reasons in the public sector, and they get chewed up really easily. And so what you're doing at the eighth grade level, we want to pray that would stick, and that those kids would have those answers, and they would know that it's true, and that because the Holy Spirit is building their faith, they would say, no, you guys are wrong, and they wouldn't be swayed by the wonderful schemes of the devil and what this flesh throws at us. And so thanks for what you do.
Yeah.
I appreciate everyone listening. Again, please like, subscribe, and share, and together we can help the church flourish.